They say in the world of organized crime, there are three types of women: those who are born into it, those who marry into it, and those who infiltrate it with a carefully crafted lie that could get them killed in a heartbeat. Isabella Romano was the third kind. For 18 months, she had been the perfect ghost, a shadow moving through the gilded halls of the Castellano crime family, collecting secrets like other women collected jewelry. She was their bookkeeper, their numbers girl, the quiet brunette with wire-rimmed glasses who processed their money laundering operations through a web of shell corporations so complex that even the FBI couldn't untangle them. They trusted her. They shouldn't have, because every ledger she balanced, every offshore account she managed, every shipment she tracked, she copied, encrypted, and sent to a secure server that only one other person in the world could access. Her handler, her father, Don Vittorio Romano, the man whose brother had been executed by the Castellanos 15 years ago in a blood feud that had never truly ended. The man who had raised Isabella not as a princess, but as a weapon, who had trained her in accounting and computer science at Oxford, then sent her into enemy territory with a new name, a fabricated past, and one simple mission: destroy them from the inside. And she was so close, so devastatingly close. Tonight was supposed to be the beginning of the end. Tonight, she would attend the Castellano annual gala at their waterfront estate, a party where every major crime family on the East Coast would gather, where deals worth hundreds of millions would be made in shadowed corners, where the Castellanos would parade their power like peacocks showing their plumes. Tonight, Isabella would plant the final piece of malware in their central server. By tomorrow morning, every transaction, every contact, every dirty secret would be in her father's hands. The Castellanos would be finished. That was the plan. But plans have a way of falling apart when you make one critical mistake. When you fall in love with the enemy. Flashback, 6 hours earlier. Isabella stood in her modest Brooklyn apartment, the one she'd rented under her alias Sophia Bennett, and stared at the evening gown hanging on her closet door. It was emerald silk, designer, worth more than 3 months of her supposed salary. A gift from him, Dante Castellano, the heir, the prince, the most dangerous man she'd ever met. At 32 years old, Dante was everything his father, Don Marco Castellano, was not. Where Marco was brutal and old-fashioned, Dante was calculating and modern. Where Marco ruled through fear, Dante ruled through loyalty he'd earned, not inherited. He'd been to Wharton Business School. He spoke 4 languages. He could discuss philosophy and art, then put a bullet between someone's eyes without his hand shaking. He was also the man who had been pursuing Isabella for the past 6 months with a patience and intensity that terrified her. Because she wanted him to. God help her, she wanted him. It had started innocuously enough. He'd asked her to explain a discrepancy in the quarterly reports. She'd stayed late, walked him through the numbers. He'd been impressed by her mind, not just her appearance. They'd started having coffee together in the mornings. Lunch occasionally. He'd asked about her life, her past, and she'd fed him the carefully constructed lies that her father had helped her create. Sophia Bennett, orphan, raised by her aunt in Connecticut, studied accounting at Boston University. No family, no ties, just a woman trying to make her way in the world. He believed every word. And then, 3 weeks ago, he'd kissed her. It was after a late night, finishing the books for a shipping operation. Everyone else had gone home. They were alone in his office, surrounded by the soft glow of computer screens and the distant hum of the city. He'd reached across the desk, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and said, "You're different from everyone else in this world, Sophia. You're real." The irony had almost made her laugh. But then his lips were on hers, and she forgot to pretend. She forgot the mission, forgot her father's voice in her head, forgot that she was supposed to be using this man. For those few perfect moments, she was just a woman being kissed by someone who made her feel alive. That was when she knew she was in trouble. That was when she knew this mission had become complicated in a way that could destroy everything. Present, the gala. Now, standing in front of her mirror, Isabella applied the final touch of lipstick, a deep wine red that matched the danger of what she was about to do. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dante. "The car is downstairs." Can't wait to see you. D. Her burner phone buzzed a second later. A text from a blocked number. Tonight. No excuses. No delays. Finish it. V. Her father. Isabella closed her eyes, steadying her breath. She was standing on a razor's edge. On one side, duty, family, revenge for an uncle she'd barely known, but whose death had shaped her entire existence. On the other side, a man who looked at her like she was the only real thing in his counterfeit world. A man who would kill her without hesitation if he ever discovered who she really was. She picked up the small clutch purse. Inside, hidden in a secret compartment, was a USB drive no bigger than her thumbnail. It contained a worm that would give her complete access to the Castellano mainframe. All she had to do was plug it into any computer at the estate. 60 seconds. That's all it would take. 60 seconds to betray the man she loved. 60 seconds to complete the mission she'd spent 18 months building. 60 seconds to choose between her heart and her blood. Isabella slipped the clutch over her shoulder, took one last look at herself in the mirror. The emerald dress, the carefully styled hair, the mask of confidence, and walked out the door. She didn't know it yet, but she would never return to this apartment. Because tonight, the carefully constructed house of cards she'd built would collapse. Tonight, Dante Castellano would discover that the woman he was falling in love with was the daughter of his family's greatest enemy. And when he did, one of them would not survive until morning. Hook ends, dramatic music crescendo. 15-second viewer engagement break. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and tell me, where are you watching from right now? And here's the real question. If you were Isabella, would you complete the mission and betray the man you love? Or would you abandon everything to save him? Let me know in the comments below. Now let's see how this night unfolds. The Castellano estate sat on 15 acres of prime waterfront property in the Hamptons, a sprawling Italian Renaissance villa that looked like it had been airlifted directly from the Amalfi Coast. Tonight, it glowed like a jewel box, every window blazing with light, the grounds illuminated by thousands of strategically placed lanterns that cast golden pools across the manicured lawns. The circular driveway was clogged with luxury vehicles, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, the occasional armored Mercedes favored by the more paranoid families. Valets in crisp white uniforms moved with military precision, while men in dark suits and earpieces scanned every arriving guest with the cold efficiency of Secret Service agents. This wasn't just a party. It was a summit, a meeting of the 5 families that controlled everything from New York to Miami: drugs, weapons, construction, unions, politicians. Billions of dollars in illegal revenue flowed through the men and women who would walk through those doors tonight. And Isabella was about to betray all of them. The black Maybach that Dante had sent for her pulled to a stop at the entrance. The driver, a man named Enzo who she knew carried at least 2 guns and had killed for the family on multiple occasions, opened her door with a slight bow. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Castellano is waiting for you in the East Gallery." "Thank you, Enzo." She stepped out, the silk of her dress whispering against her skin. The October air was cool, carrying the salt scent of the ocean. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the gentle crash of waves against the private beach. For just a moment, Isabella allowed herself to feel the weight of what she was about to do. 18 months of her life, 18 months of lies, of carefully constructed identity, of memorizing details and maintaining the fiction of Sophia Bennett. All of it was about to culminate in the next few hours. She walked up the marble steps, past the security checkpoint where she was scanned with a metal detector wand, standard procedure, even for known associates. The security chief, a hulking man named Rocco with a face like a weathered cliff, nodded to her. "You're clear, Miss Bennett. Beautiful dress." "Thank you, Rocco. If only you knew what's in my purse," she thought. The USB drive was wrapped in a lead-line sleeve that blocked scanning technology. Another gift from her father's tech team. The Romano family might not have the raw muscle of the Castellanos, but they had something more valuable: brains, technology, and patience. Isabella stepped into the grand foyer, and her breath caught, despite herself. The villa's interior was a masterpiece of old-world elegance. Frescoed ceilings soared overhead, depicting classical scenes of Roman gods and goddesses. The floors were inlaid marble in intricate geometric patterns. A double staircase curved upward like swan's wings, leading to the second floor. And everywhere, covering the walls, positioned on pedestals, hanging from the ceilings, was art. Real art. Caravaggios, Titians, Botticellis. Pieces worth millions, casually displayed like family photographs. This was the wealth built on blood and suffering. And Isabella was here to burn it all down. Sophia. The voice made her turn, and her heart betrayed her by skipping a beat. Dante Castellano descended the left staircase with the kind of confidence that came from knowing you owned everything you surveyed. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that had clearly been custom-tailored to his athletic frame. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his olive skin freshly shaven, and his eyes, those impossibly dark eyes that seemed to see straight through her, were fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin flush. But it was his smile that undid her. Genuine, warm, reaching all the way to those dangerous eyes. You look. He paused at the bottom of the stairs, taking her in completely. There aren't words in English or Italian adequate to describe how beautiful you look tonight. You sent me the dress, Isabella said, managing to keep her voice steady. I think that makes you partially responsible. I chose the color because I thought it would complement your eyes. I was right. He reached her, took her hand, and kissed it in a gesture that should have been old-fashioned but somehow felt intimate. But the woman wearing it is doing all the work. He tucked her hand into the crook of his arm, and Isabella caught the scent of his cologne, something expensive and woody with notes of bergamot, a scent that had become dangerously familiar over the past months. Come, my father wants to greet you before the evening begins in earnest. Her stomach tightened. Don Marco Castellano, the man who had ordered her uncle's execution, the man whose empire she was here to dismantle. They walked through the villa, past rooms filled with early arrivals. Men in expensive suits conducting quiet business, women in designer gowns sipping champagne and trading gossip that probably contained more useful intelligence than most police wiretaps. Dante navigated through it all with practiced ease, greeting people with a perfect blend of warmth and authority. Isabella recognized faces from the dossiers her father had compiled. Carlo Marchetti of the Marchetti family, who controlled the ports in New Jersey. Sophia Russo, the only female Don in the 5 families, who ran prostitution and human trafficking with ruthless efficiency. Tommy the Knife DeLuca, who handled enforcement for the Castellanos and had allegedly killed over 40 people personally. These are not good people. Isabella reminded herself of that as Dante smiled and laughed, as he introduced her as Sophia, our brilliant financial mind. These people destroyed lives, poisoned communities with drugs, enslaved women and children, corrupted every system meant to protect the innocent. They deserved what was coming. But when Dante squeezed her hand gently, when he looked at her with pride and something deeper, something that looked unsettlingly like love, doubt crept in like smoke under a door. They entered the East Gallery, a long room lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean on one side and priceless paintings on the other. At the far end, standing before a Caravaggio original, was Don Marco Castellano. At 65, Marco was still an imposing figure. Tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wore a traditional black suit with a white pocket square, and he leaned on a cane topped with a gold lion's head. Not because he needed it, Isabella knew, but because it had belonged to his father and grandfather before him. When Marco turned to face them, Isabella saw where Dante had gotten his intensity. The Don's eyes were black as coal and twice as hard. "Papa," Dante said, his voice taking on a formal tone. "May I present Sophia Bennett?" Isabella had been trained for this moment. She knew the proper level of deference to show. Not too much, which would seem weak, but not too little, which would seem disrespectful. She extended her hand. "Don Castellano, thank you for inviting me to your home." Marco took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he held it, studying her face with unnerving thoroughness. For a terrifying moment, Isabella wondered if somehow he knew, if somehow he could see through the 18 months of deception. "So," Marco said in a voice like gravel, "you are the accountant who has been keeping my son occupied." There was no warmth in the statement, no welcome. "I work for the family's financial division," Isabella said carefully. "Your son has been overseeing the modernization of our portfolio management." Marco released her hand and turned to Dante. "She is very pretty. Too pretty to be trusted with our numbers." It was a test. Isabella had seen Marco's file. He deliberately insulted people to see how they'd react. "With respect, Don Castellano," Isabella said, her voice firm but not aggressive, "my appearance has nothing to do with my ability to manage complex financial instruments. I graduated summa cum laude from Boston University with dual degrees in accounting and computer science. I hold 3 professional certifications. And in the 18 months I've worked for your organization, I've increased efficiency in your overseas holdings by 37% while reducing exposure to federal audits by half." She paused, meeting his eyes directly. "If you'd like to judge me on my appearance, that's your prerogative. But the numbers don't lie, and the numbers say I'm very good at my job." Silence fell over the room. Dante was staring at her with barely concealed admiration and a hint of concern. Marco's expression didn't change for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then, slowly, his lips curved into something that might have been a smile. "Fire," he said. "I like fire in a woman. It reminds me of my late wife." He looked at Dante. "This one is acceptable. Don't fuck it up." It was the closest thing to a blessing Isabella was going to get. Marco turned away, his attention already shifting to other matters. "Dante, the Russians will arrive in 30 minutes. I want you present for the discussion. We're renegotiating the Brooklyn territories." "Of course, Papa." Marco walked away without another word, his cane tapping against the marble floor with each step. Dante let out a breath and turned to Isabella. "You just stood up to Marco Castellano. People have been killed for less." "He was testing me," Isabella said. "If I backed down, he would have seen me as weak." "You're right. But still." Dante pulled her closer, his hand sliding to the small of her back. "You continue to amaze me, Sophia Bennett. The lies. The endless lies. And the worst part was how natural they felt now. How easily they spilled from her lips." "I should freshen up before dinner," Isabella said, needing distance, needing a moment to collect herself. "Where's the powder room?" "Second floor, west wing." "But Sophia..." He caught her hand, pulled her back. "What you did just now, standing up to my father. Most people are terrified of him. You treated him like an equal." "Why?" "Because I've been trained since childhood not to fear men like him. Because my father is just as dangerous, just as ruthless. Because I'm not Sophia Bennett, the orphan accountant. I'm Isabella Romano, and I've been preparing for this war my entire life." But she couldn't say any of that. "Because respect is earned, not given," she said instead. "And because I refuse to make myself smaller to make powerful men comfortable." Dante stared at her for a long moment, and Isabella saw something shift in his expression, something that looked like wonder mixed with something deeper. "I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly. "I've been fighting it for months, telling myself it's too soon, too complicated. But standing here, watching you face down my father without flinching." He touched her face gently. "I'm done fighting it, Sophia. I love you." The words hit her like physical blows. No, this couldn't happen. This wasn't part of the plan. "Dante, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted. "I know it's fast. I know we haven't known each other that long. But when you know, you know. And I know." He kissed her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. "Go freshen up. We'll talk more after dinner. There's something important I need to ask you tonight." He released her and walked away, heading toward where his father had disappeared, leaving Isabella standing alone in the East Gallery, her mission suddenly infinitely more complicated. Because she knew what he was going to ask, and she had no idea how to answer. "Oh no, this is getting messy. Quick question. Do you think Dante genuinely loves her, or is he suspicious and playing his own game?" Drop your theories in the comments. Now let's see what happens when Isabella goes upstairs. The west wing of the Castellano estate was quieter removed from the growing crowd downstairs. Isabella's heels clicked against marble as she walked down the corridor, passing door after door what she assumed were bedrooms and private offices. She wasn't really looking for a powder room. She was looking for the server room. According to the estate blueprints her father's team had acquired through a bribed county clerk, the central computer system was housed in a climate-controlled room on the second floor, disguised as a study. It would be locked, certainly, but Isabella had tools for that. She pulled out her phone, pretending to check messages while actually pulling up the digital floor plan. The study should be 3 doors down on the left, marked on the official plans as Library 2. Her heart was hammering now, adrenaline sharpening her senses. This was it, the moment 18 months had been building toward. She reached the door. Solid mahogany, with an electronic keypad lock. High-end security, but nothing her equipment couldn't handle. Isabella glanced both ways down the corridor. Empty. The sounds of the party were distant, muffled. She had maybe 10 minutes before someone noticed her absence. She reached into her clutch and pulled out what looked like a compact makeup mirror. She flipped it open, but instead of a mirror, the interior housed a sophisticated RFID cloner. Another toy from her father's tech division. She held it near the keypad. The device emitted a soft beep, reading the residual signals from the last several entries. Numbers appeared on the tiny screen. 7-4-1-9-6-3. Isabella punched in the code. The lock clicked. The door swung open. She slipped inside and closed it behind her, engaging the interior lock. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. The room was exactly as described. Shelves of leather-bound books that were probably never read, expensive furniture, and against the far wall, hidden behind a sliding panel, the real prize. A bank of servers humming quietly, their LEDs blinking like earthbound stars. Isabella approached them, pulling out the USB drive. Her hands were steady. Years of training ensured that, but her mind was chaos. "I love you." Dante's voice echoed in her head. She pushed it away, focused on the mission. This was bigger than her feelings. Bigger than whatever connection she and Dante had formed. This was about justice, about family, about ending a criminal empire that had caused immeasurable suffering. She found the main terminal, powered it on. The screen glowed to life, requesting credentials. This was where her 18 months of access paid off. As the organization's senior financial analyst, she had legitimate high-level passwords. She typed them in, and the system accepted her without question. Isabella inserted the USB drive. The worm would take 60 seconds to install. 60 seconds to copy every file, create backdoors, establish remote access for her father's team. 60 seconds to destroy everything Dante's family had built. A progress bar appeared, 1%, 5%, 12%. Her phone buzzed in her clutch. She pulled it out, expecting another message from her father. Instead, it was a text from Dante. "Where are you? The Russians arrived early. I want you beside me. D." Her throat tightened. He wanted her at his side during a major negotiation. He was including her in the inner circle, showing her off to the other families, making it clear she was important to him. 27%, 34%, 41%. Isabella stared at the progress bar, and for the first time since this mission began, she hesitated. What was she really doing here? Yes, the Castellanos were criminals. Yes, they'd killed her uncle. But her uncle had also been a criminal. He died in a power struggle, a war between equally dirty families fighting over the same blood-soaked territories. And Dante wasn't his father. She watched him over these months. Yes, he was ruthless when necessary. Yes, he'd killed, she knew that. But he'd also shown her a different side. He'd told her about his mother, who died of cancer when he was 16. He'd shown her his collection of rare books, his genuine love for Renaissance art. He'd told her that he stayed in this life because of duty, because his father needed him, but that he dreamed of something different. "Sometimes I think about just walking away," he told her late one night in his office. "Taking a boat, sailing to some small island where nobody knows who I am, living a simple life. But then I remember, this is my family, my blood. I can't abandon them." 58%, 65%, 73%. Isabella's finger hovered over the cancel button. She could stop this. Destroy the USB drive. Walk away. Tell her father the mission had failed. She'd be disowned, certainly. Cut off from the only family she'd ever known. But she'd be free. Free to become Sophia Bennett for Real. Free to love Dante without the crushing weight of lies. 85%. 91%. Stop being weak, she whispered to herself. This is what you were made for. 97%. 99%. Upload complete. The screen flashed green. The worm was in. Every file was being copied to encrypted servers her father controlled. Every backdoor was open. It was done. Isabella pulled out the USB drive and slipped it back in her clutch. She powered down the terminal, closed the panel over the servers, and moved toward the door. Her hand was on the handle when she heard voices in the corridor outside. She froze. "Don't trust the Russians," a man's voice said. Rough, aggressive. She recognized it. Tommy the knife, DeLuca the Castellano enforcer. "Neither does the Don," a second voice replied. Smoother, more refined. "That was Carmine Vitali, Marco's consigliere. That's why we're running surveillance during the meeting. If they make a move, we'll know before they do." "What about the girl?" "The accountant." Isabella's blood turned to ice. "What about her?" Carmine asked. "Dante's been spending a lot of time with her, making her privy to operational details. You don't think that's a risk?" "Dante knows what he's doing. The girl has been thoroughly vetted. Rocco ran her background 6 times. She's clean." "Nobody's that clean," Tommy growled. "I don't like it. Pretty girl shows up out of nowhere. Suddenly she's got access to our financial systems. It smells wrong. Then take it up with Dante. Or better yet, with Marco. But I'm telling you, you're being paranoid." Their voices faded as they moved down the corridor. Isabella stood perfectly still, her heart racing. Tommy was suspicious. If he started digging deeper, asked the right questions, paid the right people, the fake identity that had held for 18 months might not survive serious scrutiny. Her father's team had been thorough, but nothing was perfect. If Tommy DeLuca started pulling threads, the whole carefully constructed fiction could unravel. She had to get out of here. Had to complete the evening without raising more suspicion. Had to play the role of Sophia Bennett perfectly. And then, tomorrow, when the Castellano Empire began to collapse from within, she needed to be far away. Isabella unlocked the door, checked that the corridor was empty, and slipped out. She walked calmly toward the main staircase, schooling her features into neutral pleasantness. As she descended the stairs, she spotted Dante in the main hall, surrounded by a group of serious-looking men in expensive suits. The Russians, she assumed. They all had that particular look. Hard eyes, expensive clothes that didn't quite fit right, the sense of barely contained violence. Dante saw her and excused himself, moving toward the staircase to meet her. "There you are. I was starting to worry. Sorry. I got turned around. This place is enormous." He took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles, a casual gesture of affection that made her chest ache. "Come. I want you to meet Alexei Volkov. He runs the Russian operations in Brighton Beach. We're discussing a partnership." Partnership, which meant alliance, which meant the Castellano Empire was about to grow even larger, even more powerful, which meant her father's timing was perfect. Isabella let Dante lead her toward the group of Russians, pasting on a polite smile, playing her role. But inside, she was calculating, planning, preparing for what came next. Because in approximately 12 hours, the worm she'd just planted would activate fully. It would start draining accounts, exposing communications, sending evidence to federal prosecutors her father had already prepared. And when that happened, Dante Castellano would know he'd been betrayed. He just didn't know yet who had betrayed him. The thought should have brought her satisfaction. Instead, it felt like swallowing broken glass. The dinner was a lavish affair, held in the estate's grand ballroom, a space that could have comfortably hosted a small wedding. 3 massive chandeliers hung from the frescoed ceiling, their crystals catching the light and scattering it across the room in prismatic patterns. The long dining table, which seated 40 people, was set with china so fine Isabella could see the candlelight through it. She was seated at Dante's right hand, a position of honor that didn't go unnoticed. Several women at the table, wives and girlfriends of various family associates, eyed her with barely concealed jealousy or speculation. Marco Castellano sat at the head of the table, naturally with Alexei Volkov, the Russian underboss, to his left. The meal proceeded with the kind of careful choreography that came from years of these gatherings. Conversation flowing in multiple languages, deals being discussed in coded phrases, alliances being formed and reformed with each course. Isabella played her part perfectly. She spoke when spoken to, laughed at the appropriate moments, and demonstrated just enough intelligence to be interesting without being threatening. But she was also listening, gathering information, making mental notes of every detail that might be useful to her father's organization. She learned that the Marchetti family was having trouble with a federal investigation into their shipping operations. That Sophia Russo was planning to expand into online operations, human trafficking via the dark web. That the Russians wanted access to the Castellanos' political connections in exchange for a cut of their arms dealing profits. Every word was another nail in their coffins. Midway through the main course, a perfectly prepared osso buco that probably cost more per plate than most people's weekly grocery budget. Dante leaned close to her ear. "You're doing wonderfully," he whispered. "My father hasn't stopped watching you all evening. I think you've impressed him." Isabella glanced toward the head of the table. Marco was indeed looking in her direction, his dark eyes unreadable. "I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a terrifying thing," she whispered back. Dante's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. "With my father, it's usually both." He released her hand and stood, tapping his wine glass with a knife. The conversations around the table quieted. "Forgive the interruption," Dante said, his voice carrying easily across the room. "But I have an announcement to make, and I wanted to do it in front of our closest friends and associates." Isabella's stomach dropped. "No, not now. Please, not now." Dante turned to her, and the look in his eyes was so open, so genuine, so full of emotion that she wanted to scream. "Sophia, these past months have been the happiest of my life. You've brought light to a world that I thought had forgotten how to be anything but dark. You've challenged me, inspired me, and made me want to be better than I am." He reached into his jacket pocket. "Oh God. Oh no." He pulled out a small velvet box. The entire room went silent, every eye fixed on them. Dante knelt beside her chair, opened the box to reveal a ring that probably cost more than a house. A brilliant cut diamond surrounded by smaller stones, set in platinum. "Sophia Bennett, will you marry me?" Time seemed to stop. Isabella stared at the ring, at Dante's hopeful face, at the 40 pairs of eyes watching her, waiting for her answer. In 12 hours, everything Dante loved would begin to crumble. In 12 hours, he would know that the woman he just proposed to was the architect of his family's destruction. In 12 hours, he would hate her more than he'd ever hated anyone. But right now, in this moment, he loved her. And God help her, she loved him too. Isabella opened her mouth to answer, not knowing what words would come out. "Wait, this is not how this was supposed to go. What would you say in this moment? Accept the proposal to keep your cover, or tell the truth and risk everything? Comments now. Let's see what Isabella decides." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. 40 people held their collective breath, waiting for Isabella's answer to a question that would seal both their fates. The diamond ring caught the chandelier light, throwing tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. It was beautiful, obscenely expensive, and it represented everything Isabella had been trained to destroy. Dante knelt beside her chair, his hand trembling slightly, the only sign of vulnerability this dangerous man would ever show in public. His dark eyes searched hers, hopeful, open, completely unaware that the woman he loved was a carefully constructed lie. Isabella's mind raced through her options with the cold calculation her father had drilled into her since childhood. Option 1, say no, reject him publicly, make an excuse, and flee. The mission was complete, the worm was planted, the data was copying. She could disappear tonight, be on a plane to Buenos Aires by morning, watched the Castellano empire burn from a safe distance. But saying no would raise immediate suspicion. Dante would ask questions, investigate, and if he discovered the truth before the worm fully activated, her father's entire operation would be compromised. Option 2. Say yes. Maintain the cover for 12 more hours. Play the happy fiancé through the rest of the evening, then disappear before dawn. By the time Dante realized both his love and his empire were gone, she'd be untouchable. It was the smart play, the strategic play, the play her father would demand she make. But there was a third option, one she'd never considered until this very moment. Option 3, tell him the truth. Right here, right now, in front of everyone. Admit who she really was. Face the consequences. Let the cards fall where they may. It was suicide. Marco Castellano would have her killed before she finished her confession. Dante would pull the trigger himself, the love in his eyes transforming to hatred in an instant. Her father's mission would fail. 18 months of work would be wasted. But at least she'd die as herself, as Isabella Romano, not as Sophia Bennett, the ghost, the fiction, the lie. Sophia. Dante's voice was gentle, but she could hear the edge of uncertainty creeping in. Are you all right? The room seemed to tilt. Isabella felt the weight of every decision she'd made in the past 18 months pressing down on her. Every lie told, every file copied, every moment of genuine connection with this man that she'd convinced herself was just part of the mission. But it wasn't. Not anymore. Somewhere along the way, the fiction had become real. The ghost had found a heartbeat, and now she had to choose, the mission or the man, duty or love, the daughter her father had created or the woman she'd become. Isabella looked into Dante's eyes and made her choice. Yes. The word came out as barely a whisper, but in the silent room, it carried like a gunshot. Dante's face transformed. The uncertainty vanished, replaced by pure, unguarded joy. He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course, he'd found out her ring size somehow, and pulled her to her feet, kissing her as the room erupted in applause. His lips were warm, his hands gentle as they framed her face, and Isabella felt something inside her chest crack wide open. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. But God, it felt right. When they broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. You've made me the happiest man alive, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Before Isabella could respond, she was swept into a whirlwind of congratulations. Women kissed her cheeks and admired the ring. Men clapped Dante on the back and made jokes about him finally settling down. Champagne appeared as if by magic, glasses raised in toasts to the happy couple. Through it all, Isabella felt like she was underwater, watching everything happen at a distance. She smiled. She laughed. She accepted congratulations and well wishes. She played the role of the delighted fiancé, but her mind was spinning, trying to figure out what she'd just done and how to salvage it. And then, across the room, she caught Don Marco Castellano's eye. The old Don wasn't smiling. He was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. For a terrifying moment, Isabella was certain he knew. Certain that somehow, he'd seen through 18 months of carefully constructed lies. But then Marco raised his glass to her, the gesture somewhere between a toast and a challenge, and turned away to speak with Alexei Volkov. Come, Dante said, taking her hand. Let's get some air. I want a moment alone with my fiancée. He led her through the French doors onto a massive stone terrace overlooking the Atlantic. The October night was cool, the ocean a dark expanse dotted with the lights of distant ships. The sounds of the party faded behind them, replaced by the rhythmic crash of waves. They were alone. Dante pulled her close, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders against the chill. I know that was overwhelming, he said. I probably should have asked you in private first, but I wanted everyone to know. I wanted the whole world to know that you're mine. Dante, I mean it, Sophia. From the moment you walked into my office 18 months ago with those ridiculous glasses and that terrified expression, trying to explain quarterly reports to a room full of criminals, I knew you were different. Special. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch achingly tender. You could have worked anywhere. Any legitimate firm would have hired you with your credentials. But you took a chance on us. On me. And I promise you, I will spend every day of the rest of our lives making sure you never regret that choice. Each word was a knife in her chest. There's something I need to tell you, Isabella said, the confession rising in her throat like bile. Later, Dante interrupted, kissing her forehead. Right now, I just want to enjoy this moment. Tomorrow, we'll start planning the wedding. We'll tell your family. I know you said you don't have anyone, but there must be someone you want to invite. And his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. It's Rocco. Security issue. I need to handle this. He looked genuinely pained. I'm sorry. This shouldn't take more than a few minutes. Wait here. Of course. He kissed her once more, then disappeared back into the party. Isabella stood alone on the terrace, staring out at the dark ocean, the engagement ring heavy on her finger. Her own phone buzzed. She pulled it out, already knowing what she'd find. A text from the blocked number. Well played. Maintain the cover until 0600. Then extraction at the safe house. Do not deviate from the plan. Your father is very pleased. Her father. Pleased that she'd agreed to marry the enemy's son as part of the mission. Pleased that she was willing to go that far for the cause. But he didn't know that when she said yes, she hadn't been thinking about the mission at all. Isabella looked at the ring on her finger, then at her phone, then back at the ocean. 12 hours. She had 12 hours to decide who she was going to be. The question was, could she live with either choice? This is getting intense. Quick poll. Team Isabella, complete the mission, or Team Dante, abandon everything for love. Drop a comment with your vote. Now let's see what happens when secrets start surfacing. Isabella stood on the terrace for another moment, letting the cold ocean air clear her head. She needed to think, needed to plan, but before she could formulate her next move, the French doors opened behind her. She turned, expecting Dante. Instead, she found herself face-to-face with Tommy the Knife DeLuca. Up close, Tommy was even more intimidating than from a distance. He was built like a boxer who'd won too many fights. Broad shoulders, scarred knuckles, a nose that had been broken multiple times. He wore an expensive suit, but it couldn't disguise what he was, a killer. Miss Bennett, Tommy said, his voice like gravel grinding together. Congratulations on your engagement. Thank you, Mr. DeLuca. Tommy, we're practically family now, right? He moved closer, standing between her and the door back to the party. You know, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. Isabella's hand instinctively went to her clutch, where she kept a small canister of pepper spray, her only weapon. Have you? Yeah. See, I'm the guy who checks things. It's my job to be suspicious, to look at a situation and ask, what doesn't fit? What's the angle? Where's the weakness? He was circling her now, slowly, like a predator assessing prey. And you, Sophia Bennett, you're an anomaly. You appeared 18 months ago with perfect credentials, perfect references, perfect everything. You slipped into our organization like you were always meant to be here. And now you're engaged to the boss's son. I'm good at my job, Isabella said, keeping her voice steady. That's not suspicious. That's competence. Sure. And your background check came back clean. 6 times, actually. Rocco's very thorough. Tommy stopped circling, facing her directly. But here's the thing about being thorough. Sometimes you're so focused on checking the obvious things that you miss the subtle ones. He pulled out his phone, and Isabella's blood turned to ice. See, I got curious tonight. So I made some calls, asked some questions, did some digging of my own. He swiped through his phone, then turned the screen toward her. It was a photograph. Old, grainy, taken from a newspaper article. It showed a family at some kind of charity event. A distinguished-looking man in his 50s, an elegant woman, and between them, a teenage girl with dark hair and familiar hazel eyes. This is from 12 years ago, Tommy said. Boston Charity Gala. That's Don Vittorio Romano, one of our biggest rivals, with his wife and daughter. He zoomed in on the girl's face. The daughter's name was Isabella. She would have been about 14 in this photo. Isabella forced herself to breathe normally. What does this have to do with me? Isabella Romano disappeared from public life about 8 years ago. Officially, The family said she was studying abroad, but there were rumors that she was being trained, prepared for something, that Vittorio was grooming her for a special purpose. He swiped to another photo. This one was more recent, a surveillance shot of a woman entering a building. The image was blurry, taken from a distance, but the resemblance was there. This was taken 6 months ago outside a Romano safe house in Brooklyn. My source says this woman delivered something to Vittorio personally. They couldn't get a clear shot of her face, but he looked up from his phone, his eyes hard. You see where I'm going with this? You're suggesting I look like some mob princess? Isabella forced a laugh. Tommy, there are millions of brunettes with hazel eyes in this country. True, but how many of them have your specific skill set? How many of them speak with a faint Boston accent that could have come from growing up in that city? How many of them would have access to the exact financial systems that could bring down this family? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I think you're Isabella Romano. I think Vittorio sent you here to infiltrate us. And I think you've been playing us all for fools for the past 18 months. Isabella met his gaze without flinching. That's quite a theory. Have you shared it with Dante Castellano? With Dante? Not yet. See, I wanted to talk to you first. Give you a chance to come clean. His hand moved to his jacket, where Isabella knew he kept a gun. Because if I'm right, if you're Isabella Romano, then we have a big problem. And the only question is how we solve it. And if you're wrong? Isabella asked, her mind racing through scenarios. If I'm exactly who I say I am, and you accuse me of being a spy based on a grainy photograph and paranoid speculation, then I apologize, and we all have a good laugh about my overactive imagination. Except we both know that's not how this works, Isabella said quietly. In your world, accusations like this don't get laughed off. Once you voice this suspicion to Marco or Dante, I'm guilty until proven innocent. And how do I prove I'm not someone else? How do I prove a negative? Tommy studied her, and Isabella saw the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing options, considering consequences. You're smart, he finally said. Smart enough to know that if I'm right, the best play is to kill me right now. I'm out here alone with you. You could push me off this terrace, claim I had too much to drink, and fell. In the confusion of the party, who would question it? Is that what you do? Isabella asked. If our positions were reversed? Without hesitation, he smiled, but there was no warmth in it, which is why I didn't come out here alone. As if on cue, the French doors opened. 2 more men stepped onto the terrace. More of Tommy's crew, Isabella assumed. Now she was outnumbered 3-1, trapped on a terrace with a 30-foot drop to the rocks below. Last chance, Sophia. Or should I call you Isabella? Tommy's hand was fully on his gun now. Tell me the truth, and maybe we can work something out. Maybe Dante doesn't have to know his fiancée is really his enemy's daughter. Maybe we can use you, flip you, turn this situation to our advantage. And if I don't cooperate, then we take you downstairs to the wine cellar, and we have a very different kind of conversation. The kind that ends with your body in the Atlantic. Isabella's mind raced. She was unarmed except for the pepper spray, which was useless against 3 trained killers. She could scream, but the party noise would drown it out. She could fight, but she'd lose. Her only weapon was her mind. You're right, she said quietly. Tommy's eyes widened slightly. What? You're right. My real name is Isabella Romano. She held up her hands in surrender. But Tommy, you've made one critical mistake in your analysis. What's that? You assumed I'm working for my father. You assumed this is about the Romanos versus the Castellanos. She smiled, and it was genuine. But what if I told you that I'm not here to destroy Dante's family? What if I told you I'm here to save it? Tommy frowned. What the hell are you talking about? My father is planning something. Something big. An attack on the 5 families that will happen in the next 48 hours. I was sent here to gather intelligence for that attack. But in the past 18 months, I've seen things. Learned things. I've realized that if my father succeeds, it won't just destroy the Castellanos. It will start a war that will tear apart everything. All the families, all the territories, all the careful balance that's kept this city from drowning in blood. She was improvising now, spinning a new lie to replace the old one. But she sold it with the conviction of truth. I came here tonight planning to warn Dante, to tell him everything and offer my help to stop my father. But then he proposed, and I realized if I tell him I'm a Romano, he'll never trust me. He'll never believe I'm trying to help. She looked at Tommy directly. But you're different. You're the one who checks things. You're the one who sees the angles. You can verify what I'm telling you. You can investigate my father's movements, his recent meetings, his unusual activity. And when you do, you'll see I'm telling the truth. Tommy stared at her for a long moment. Why should I believe you? Because in about 6 hours, a shipment of weapons that's supposed to arrive at the port of Newark, a shipment the Castellanos have invested heavily in, is going to be intercepted by the FBI. My father arranged it. He has someone inside your organization feeding him information. She could see Tommy processing this. Who? I don't know. My father kept that from me. But I know the shipment details. Pier 47, container number TCLU, 4387651, arriving on the shippo Poseidon at 0600 hours. If you check your records, you'll see I'm telling the truth about the shipment. And if you put extra surveillance on it, you'll catch the rat. It was a calculated risk. Isabella had seen that shipment mentioned in files she'd copied. She didn't actually know if it was going to be intercepted. She was gambling that Tommy wouldn't be able to verify that detail before dawn. But it was plausible enough to buy her time. Tommy pulled out his phone, typed something, waited. His phone buzzed. He read the message, and his expression changed. The shipment is real, he said slowly, and it's flagged as high priority. If we lose it, he looked at her with new eyes. If you're lying to me, I will personally cut you into pieces. I'm not lying. Check the pier at dawn. You'll see. Tommy stared at her for another long moment, then jerked his head at his two associates. Go back inside, and not a word about this to anyone. I need to verify some things. The two men left. Tommy and Isabella were alone again. You just bought yourself 12 hours, Tommy said. If that shipment gets intercepted and we don't catch the rat, I'm coming for you. Dante's fiancée or not. Understood, understood. And Sophia, or Isabella, or whoever the hell you are, if you're playing some deeper game, if this is all another layer of deception, you should know I'm very good at my job. And my job is making problems disappear. He walked past her, back toward the party, leaving her alone on the terrace. Isabella's legs nearly gave out. She gripped the stone railing, her hands shaking. She just improvised her way out of immediate death. But in doing so, she'd created a new problem. In 6 hours, when nothing happened at that pier, Tommy would know she'd lied. And then there would be nowhere to hide. The worm in the Castellano system would activate at dawn. The Romano attack would begin. And she would be caught in the crossfire between the man she loved and the father who'd created her to be a weapon. The French doors opened again. This time it was Dante. There you are. Sorry that took so long. He stopped, seeing her expression. Sophia, what's wrong? You're pale. Isabella looked at her fiancé, the ring heavy on her finger, and realized she was out of time. The truth was coming. Whether she told it or it exploded around them, the reckoning was near. Dante, she said quietly, we need to talk. Oh no, Tommy knows. The shipment is a lie, and Isabella is about to confess to Dante. What do you think happens next? Drop your predictions below. This is about to get wild. Dante stepped fully onto the terrace, closing the French doors behind him, shutting out the sounds of the party. His expression shifted from concern to something harder, more guarded. You want to talk? Now, on our engagement night. His voice was carefully neutral. That's not usually a good sign. Isabella turned away from him, gripping the stone railing, staring out at the dark ocean. She could feel him behind her, waiting, and for a moment she was paralyzed by the enormity of what she was about to do. 18 months of lies, all about to come crashing down. Before I say anything, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I need you to know that what I'm about to tell you is going to hurt you. It's going to make you angry. It's probably going to make you hate me. But I need to say it anyway because I can't. Her voice cracked. I can't keep lying to you. She heard him move closer. Sophia, you're scaring me. Whatever it is, just tell me. Isabella turned to face him. In the moonlight, he looked younger, more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. The dangerous underboss was gone, replaced by a man who was simply worried about the woman he loved. It made what she had to do so much harder. "My name isn't Sophia Bennett," she said. "There is no Sophia Bennett. That identity is a fiction. A cover story created by a team of experts to infiltrate your organization." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Dante's face went very still. "What? My real name is Isabella Romano. I'm the daughter of Don Vittorio Romano. I was sent here 18 months ago to gather intelligence on the Castellano family, to learn your weaknesses, to find a way to destroy you from the inside." She watched the information hit him like a series of physical blows. His expression cycled through disbelief, shock, and finally, a cold fury that made him look exactly like his father. "You're lying," he said flatly. "This is some kind of joke." "I wish it was." Isabella reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. She opened a hidden app, one that required a fingerprint and a passcode to access, and turned the screen toward him. On her photos, the Romano family estate, her father, herself as a teenager, before she'd created the Sophia Bennett persona, and finally, the most damning evidence: encrypted files showing 18 months of intelligence reports she'd sent to her father. Dante stared at the phone, his jaw working. Then, very slowly, he looked up at her. "Isabella Romano," he said, testing the name. "Vittorio's daughter. The one who disappeared years ago." "I didn't disappear. I was being prepared, educated, trained. My father spent years turning me into the perfect infiltrator. And then he sent me here to destroy us." "Yes." Dante laughed, but it was a terrible sound, devoid of humor. 18 months. 18 months of... He stopped, running his hand through his hair. "Did you sleep with me as part of the mission? Was that just another intelligence-gathering technique?" "No." Isabella stepped toward him, but he backed away. "Dante, please listen." "Listen? To more lies? How do I know anything you're about to say is true?" "Because I'm risking my life telling you this." Isabella's voice rose. "If your father finds out who I am, he'll kill me. If my father finds out I've told you, he'll kill me. I'm dead either way, but I'm telling you anyway because..." She stopped, forcing herself to breathe. "Because at some point in the last 18 months, I stopped pretending. My feelings for you became real." "Real," Dante repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You don't even know what that word means. Everything about you is a lie. Every conversation we had, every moment we shared, every time you looked at me and I thought I saw something genuine, it was all performance. You're an actress playing a role." "I was at first," Isabella admitted. "But Dante, people change. I changed. You changed me. The man I was supposed to hate, the enemy I was supposed to destroy, I fell in love with him instead." "Don't." Dante's voice was sharp as broken glass. "Don't say that word. Don't insult me by pretending what we had was love." He pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Isabella asked, alarm rising in her chest. "Why should I have done the moment you finished talking?" "I'm calling my father. I'm calling security. And then we're going to have a very long conversation in the wine cellar about everything you've done, every secret you've stolen, every move your father is planning." "Dante, wait. Give me one reason. One reason why I shouldn't hand you over to my father right now." Isabella took a breath. "Because in approximately 5 hours, a shipment of weapons arriving at the port of Newark is going to be intercepted by the FBI. Your family will lose millions, and several of your men will be arrested. I can stop that from happening." Dante's finger paused over his phone. "How do you know about that shipment?" "Because my father arranged for the FBI to be there. He has someone inside your organization. I don't know who, but if you move the shipment or increase security, we can catch them." "We?" Dante's laugh was bitter. "There is no we, Isabella. You're a Romano. I'm a Castellano. There's 5 generations of blood between our families." "I know, and that's exactly why my father sent me here, because he knew that blood feud would blind you to the possibility that someone like me could get close. But Dante, I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to verify what I'm telling you. Check your shipment manifests. Confirm the Newark delivery, and then decide whether I'm still lying." Dante stared at her for a long moment, then made a call. It was brief, terse, conducted in a mixture of English and Italian too rapid for most people to follow. When he hung up, his expression was dark. The shipment is real, and it's one of our biggest weapons deals this quarter. If it gets intercepted, he looked at her with something close to hatred. How long have you known about this? I found out 3 days ago. I was planning to warn you tonight, but then you proposed, and everything became complicated. Complicated. Dante shook his head. You have a gift for understatement. He paced the terrace, thinking, calculating. If what you're saying is true, if my father has a rat in his organization, then you just saved us from a major loss. But that doesn't change what you are. It doesn't erase 18 months of betrayal. I know, and you said there's someone inside our organization. Do you have any idea who? Isabella hesitated. This was the moment where she could pivot, where she could use Tommy's suspicions to her advantage. But she'd started with the truth. She had to continue with it. Tommy DeLuca suspects something. He confronted me before you came out here. He's the one who identified me as Isabella Romano. Dante's head snapped up. Tommy knows. He pieced it together from old photographs and surveillance reports. He gave me 12 hours to prove I'm here to help you, not hurt you. That's why I told you about the Newark shipment. If we catch the rat, it proves my intentions. Or it proves you're playing an even deeper game, Dante said coldly. Maybe you're sacrificing a smaller operation to protect a larger one. Maybe this is all misdirection. It's not. Dante, I know you have no reason to believe me, but you're damn right I have no reason to believe you. He grabbed her arm, not gently. For all I know, your father is planning to hit us during the Newark operation. Maybe you're telling me about it, so we'll send our resources there, leaving us vulnerable somewhere else. That's not. How would I know? How would I know what's truth and what's lies when every single thing about you is fabricated? The French doors burst open. Marco Castellano stepped onto the terrace, flanked by Rocco and 2 other guards. The old Don's face was thunderous. Dante, step away from the girl. Dante released Isabella's arm, but didn't move away. Papa, how did you? Tommy came to me 5 minutes ago with a very interesting theory about your fiancé. He said I should listen to the terrace conversation you were about to have. Marco held up a phone, and Isabella's stomach sank. This is a very sophisticated listening device. Every word you two said has been transmitted directly to my phone. He'd heard everything. The entire confession. Papa, Dante started. Be quiet, Dante. Marco's voice was absolute authority. He walked toward Isabella slowly, his cane tapping against the stone terrace. Isabella Romano. In my house. At my table. Wearing my son's ring. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the fury in his dark eyes. Your father sent you here to destroy us. You spent 18 months stealing our secrets, learning our weaknesses, preparing to strike. And then you had the audacity, his voice rose, to accept a marriage proposal from my son, to let him make a public declaration in front of every family on the East Coast, knowing it was all a lie. Don Castellano, you will speak when I give you permission to speak. Marco's hand shot out, gripping her chin, forcing her to look at him. You are Vittorio Romano's daughter. Do you deny it? No. And you were sent here to infiltrate my organization? Yes. And everything about Sophia Bennett is a fiction? Yes. Marco released her chin. Rocco, take her to the wine cellar. Use whatever methods are necessary to extract every piece of information she has. I want to know every plan, every contact, every move Vittorio is making. And when you're done, he paused. Dispose of her. Quietly. No. Dante stepped between Isabella and the guards. Papa, she just told me about the Newark shipment. She's warning us about an FBI trap, which could be misdirection, Marco said coldly. Or haven't you considered that possibility? She's had 18 months to learn how we think, how we react. This could all be part of a larger plan. Then let me verify it. Let me check the Newark operation, increase security, see if we can catch the rat. If she's lying, if this is a trap, we'll know in a few hours. And then you can do whatever you want her. And in those few hours, she could get a message to her father. She could warn him that we're onto the Newark situation. She could compromise everything. She won't. Dante's voice was firm. I'll watch her myself. She doesn't leave my sight. No phone, no communication with anyone. Just a few hours to verify her story. Marco studied his son, and Isabella could see the calculation in the old Don's eyes. He was weighing options, considering angles. "You love her," Marco said finally. "Even knowing what she is, what she's done, you love her. I can see it in your eyes. That's irrelevant. It's extremely relevant. Because love makes you weak. It makes you vulnerable. It clouds your judgment." Marco stepped closer to his son. "This woman played you, Dante. She seduced you, manipulated you, all in service of her father's vendetta. And now you want to give her more time because of some fairy tale hope that maybe, somehow, she actually has feelings for you." "She saved the family from major loss," Dante said. "That has to count for something. Or she sacrificed a pawn to protect the king. A small loss to ensure a bigger victory." Marco turned his gaze to Isabella. "What is your father planning? What is the endgame?" Isabella met his eyes. She could lie, should lie, but she was so tired of lies. "I don't know the full plan," she said. "My father compartmentalized information. I was only given pieces, gather intelligence, build trust, wait for instructions. But I know he's planning something big, something that involves all 5 families. And I know it's happening soon. Within 48 hours. That's all I know." Marco stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Rocco. "Lock her in the West Wing guest room. Post guards at the door and window. No phone, no communication devices. Dante, if you want to vouch for her, then you watch her personally. If anything happens, if we're attacked, if the Newark shipment is compromised in a way that benefits the Romanos, she dies. Immediately. No trial, no questions." "Understood." "Understood," Dante said. Marco looked at Isabella one last time. "You have until dawn, Miss Romano. If your warning about Newark proves legitimate and we catch the rat, I might let you live long enough to answer more questions. If not," he smiled, and it was terrifying. "Well, the ocean is very deep, and it keeps secrets very well." He turned and walked back into the party, Rocco following. The 2 remaining guards moved toward Isabella. Dante held up a hand. "I'll take her upstairs myself." The guards hesitated, then nodded and took up positions by the French doors. Dante took Isabella's arm, not roughly, but firmly, and led her back into the villa, past the ballroom where the party continued in oblivious celebration, up the grand staircase, down the long corridor to a guest room in the West Wing. The room was lavish, 4-poster bed, expensive furniture, a view of the ocean, but it was still a prison. Dante closed the door behind them and turned to face her. "You have 5 hours," he said quietly. 5 hours until the Newark shipment arrives. 5 hours to prove you're telling the truth. If that shipment gets compromised and we don't catch the rat, my father will kill you. And I won't be able to stop him. I know. And even if you're telling the truth, even if everything you said on that terrace was real, I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you've done." Isabella nodded, blinking back tears. "I understand." Dante moved toward the door, then stopped. Without turning around, he said, "The worst part is that I believe you. I believe that somewhere in the past 18 months, you actually did fall in love with me. I can see it in your eyes. I can hear it in your voice. And that makes this so much worse. Because it means we could have had something real. If you've been honest. If you come to me months ago and told me the truth. We could have found a way. Dante, but you didn't. You kept lying. You kept playing the role. And now it's too late. Even if we survive tonight, even if your warning saves us and we catch the rat, there's too much blood between our families. Too much history. Too many lies." He opened the door. 2 guards were already positioned outside. "I'll be back before dawn," Dante said, still not looking at her, "to find out if you've saved your life or sealed your fate." Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid. Isabella sank onto the bed, the engagement ring still on her finger. A beautiful lie, a promise that could never be kept. Outside the window, the ocean rolled on, indifferent to the drama of humans and their endless wars. And somewhere in the city, her father was making his final preparations for an attack that would reshape the entire underworld. Dawn was coming, and with it, the truth in all its terrible, destructive glory. "This is heartbreaking," Isabella confessed. "Dante knows everything, and they only have 5 hours. Do you think she'll survive until dawn?" Comment yes or no. Let's see if her gamble pays off. Isabella didn't sleep. She sat by the window watching the sky slowly transition from black to the deep blue of pre-dawn, counting down the minutes until her fate would be decided. The engagement ring on her finger caught the first rays of sunlight, throwing tiny prisms across the wall, beautiful and mocking. At 4:47 a.m., her door opened. Dante stood in the doorway, his tuxedo jacket gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, looking exhausted. Behind him, she could see the guards still stationed in the hallway. "Get up," he said. "We're going to Newark." Isabella stood quickly. "What's happening?" "My father decided that if you're telling the truth, you should be there to see it proven. And if you're lying..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They walked through the silent villa. The party had ended hours ago. The guests departed, but the house still smelled of expensive perfume and cigar smoke. In the foyer, Tommy DeLuca waited with 4 other men, all armed, all watching Isabella with expressions that ranged from suspicious to openly hostile. "The princess joins us," Tommy said flatly. "How generous of Adon to let you watch your own trap spring." "Enough," Dante snapped. "If she's right, we catch a rat. If she's wrong, you could say I told you so while we dump her body in the Atlantic. Either way, we'll know in an hour." They loaded into 2 black SUVs. Isabella sat in the back of the lead vehicle between Dante and Tommy, feeling the weight of their suspicion like a physical pressure. Neither man spoke to her during the 40-minute drive into Newark. The port of Newark was a sprawling maze of shipping containers, cranes, and warehouses that processed millions of tons of cargo annually. At 5:30 a.m., it should have been quiet, with only skeleton crews preparing for the day's shift. Instead, as they approached Pier 47, Isabella could see unusual activity. Unmarked vehicles parked in strategic positions. Men in casual clothes who moved with the distinctive awareness of law enforcement, trying to look like dock workers. "FBI," Tommy muttered. She was right about that part at least. Dante pulled out his phone and made a call. "Enzo, status?" Isabella couldn't hear the response, but she saw Dante's jaw tighten. "The shipment is there," he told Tommy. "Container TCLU, 4387651, exactly where it's supposed to be. And there's definitely a federal presence. At least a dozen agents that we can identify, probably more we can't. So the trap is real," Tommy said, looking at Isabella with grudging respect. "Question is, who said it?" "That's what we're about to find out," Dante said. They parked a safe distance away, in a lot of a closed warehouse that gave them a clear view of Pier 47. Dante pulled out a tablet and opened what appeared to be a security camera feed. 3 months ago, I installed hidden cameras throughout our primary operation sites," Dante explained. "My father doesn't know about them. They're my insurance policy, a way to verify loyalty when trust isn't enough." He pulled up camera feeds showing different angles of the pier. Container TCLU 4387651 was clearly visible, surrounded by dock workers who were obviously federal agents. "Now we wait," Dante said. "Our shipment crew is scheduled to arrive at exactly 0600. When they do, if Isabella is telling the truth, someone will have tipped off the FBI about the timing. The agents will move in, and we'll see who the rat is." The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Isabella's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd gambled everything on this moment. Her life, her father's mission, any chance of a future with Dante. If she was wrong, if the FBI didn't move, if there was no rat to catch, she didn't want to think about what would happen then. At 5:58 a.m., a truck appeared at the pier entrance. Isabella recognized the driver from files she'd seen. Paulie Marino, one of the Castellano's most trusted transporters. "That's our guy," Tommy confirmed. "Right on schedule." The truck approached the container. The disguised FBI agents tensed, but didn't move yet. They were waiting for the crime to be committed, for the weapons to be loaded, for the evidence to be irrefutable. And then, on one of Dante's hidden camera feeds, Isabella saw movement in an unexpected location. "There," she said, pointing at the screen. "Loading dock office, second window." Dante zoomed in. Through the window, they could see a figure on a cell phone, watching the scene unfold below. The person was positioned perfectly to observe both the arriving truck and the FBI agents. "Can you get a better angle?" Tommy asked. Dante switched to a different camera feed, one positioned inside the office building. The image was grainy, but clear enough to identify the person on the phone. Tommy swore loudly in Italian. It was Carmine Vitali, Don Marco's consigliere, his most trusted advisor, the man who'd been with the family for 30 years. "Carmine," Dante breathed, and Isabella could hear the shock in his voice. "He's been with my father since before I was born." They watched as Carmine spoke into his phone, then hung up. Seconds later, the FBI agents moved in, swarming the truck, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Paulie Marino was forced to the ground, hands zip-tied behind his back. The shipment was lost. The operation compromised, just as Isabella had predicted. But they had their rat. "Son of a bitch," Tommy said, his voice tight with rage. 30 years. He's been selling us out for how long? Dante was already on his phone. "Papa, we have a situation. You need to see this. Now." By the time they returned to the Castellano estate, the sun was fully up, painting the ocean in shades of gold and orange. Don Marco was waiting in his study, still wearing his tuxedo from the night before, his expression carved from granite. Dante played the video footage without preamble. They all watched in silence as Carmine Vitali, trusted consigliere, family friend, godfather to Dante himself, made the call that destroyed their shipment and sent a loyal soldier to federal prison. When the video ended, Marco sat very still for a long moment. "How long?" he finally asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "We're analyzing all the footage going back 3 months, Dante said. But preliminary review suggests this isn't the first time. There are at least 4 other instances where Carmine was in the right place at the right time before operations went wrong." 4. Marco's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "For operations. Millions in losses. Men arrested. All because he stopped breathing heavily." Tommy stepped forward. "Boss, we need to move now. If Carmine realizes we're onto him." "He won't run," Marco interrupted. "He's too arrogant, too certain of his position. He'll come here for breakfast, as he does every Sunday morning, and he'll sit at my table and eat my food and smile at me like he hasn't been betraying me for months." The old Don stood, leaning heavily on his cane, and walked to the window overlooking his estate. "Bring him to me when he arrives. Don't tell him anything is wrong. Don't let him suspect. I want to look in his eyes when I ask him why he destroyed everything I built." He turned to face Isabella, who'd been standing silently in the corner. "You," Marco said. "Isabella Romano. You saved us from this trap. You gave us the rat." "What?" Isabella met his gaze steadily. "Because despite what my father believes, this isn't about revenge anymore. It's about preventing a war that will kill hundreds of people. My father's vendetta against your family has consumed him. He's willing to burn down the entire underworld to satisfy it. I can't be part of that." "Noble words," Marco said, "but you're still a Romano. You're still Vittorio's daughter. How do I know this isn't another layer of deception? How do I know you didn't sacrifice Carmine to gain my trust?" "You don't," Isabella said simply. "You'll never know for certain. But Don Castellano, ask yourself, what would I gain from this? If my goal was to destroy you, I had 18 months to do it. I had access to your financial systems, your operations, your most sensitive information. I could have caused damage beyond repair. Instead, I'm standing here having confessed everything, having given you proof of betrayal from within your own inner circle." Marco studied her for a long moment. Then he looked at his son. "Dante, what do you think? You've spent the most time with her. Is she telling the truth?" Dante's expression was conflicted. "I don't know, Papa. I want to believe her." But he stopped, running his hand through his hair. "I think she believes what she's saying. Whether that makes it true is another question." "A politician's answer," Marco said with a hint of amusement. Then his expression hardened. "Very well. Isabella Romano, you have bought yourself more time. You will remain here under guard until I can verify the extent of Carmine's betrayal and determine what your father's next move is. If your information continues to prove accurate, if you continue to help us, we will reassess your situation. And if my information is wrong, Then you join Carmine in whatever punishment I devise. Marco's smile was terrifying. And I assure you, I'm very creative when I'm angry. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rocco stepped in. Boss, Carmine just arrived. He's in the breakfast room, waiting for you. Perfect. Marco straightened his jacket, his face transforming into a mask of calm authority. Gentlemen, Miss Romano, you're about to witness what happens when someone betrays the Castellano family. Consider it an education. The breakfast room was a sunlit space overlooking the gardens, with a long table set for an intimate meal. Carmine Vitali sat at his usual place, sipping espresso and reading the morning newspaper, looking completely at ease. He was in his late 50s, with silver hair and a distinguished appearance. He wore an expensive suit and exuded the calm confidence of a man who'd been at the right hand of power for 3 decades. When Marco entered with Dante, Tommy, and Isabella, Carmine looked up with a warm smile. Marco, Dante, I wasn't expecting such a crowd for breakfast. His eyes landed on Isabella, and something flickered in his expression, surprise quickly masked. And Miss Bennett, or should I say, Miss Romano. The room went very still. Carmine set down his espresso cup carefully. Yes, I know who she really is. I've known for 6 months. That's why I was about to come to you, Marco. That's why I requested this breakfast meeting. I have important information about a Romano infiltration of our organization. Isabella felt ice flood her veins. He was going to flip this, going to make it seem like he'd discovered her, like he was the loyal one. How convenient, Marco said, his voice mild. And when exactly were you planning to share this information with me? Carmine? Before or after you made another phone call to the FBI? Carmine's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult me with lies. Marco pulled out a tablet and played the video of Carmine in the pier office, making the call that destroyed their shipment. As the video played, Carmine's expression cycled through shock, fear, and finally, resignation. How long? Marco asked softly. How long have you been selling us out, old friend? Carmine slumped in his chair. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, 7 years. Since Rosa died. Rosa had been Carmine's daughter. She died of a drug overdose 7 years ago. The drugs that killed her came from our suppliers, Carmine continued, his voice hollow. She bought them from a dealer we protected. My own daughter, killed by the poison we spread through this city. And when I came to you, Marco, when I begged you to shut down the drug operations, what did you say? I said business is business, Marco replied quietly, and that your personal tragedy didn't change our operations. Exactly. Carmine looked up, and his eyes were filled with decades of suppressed rage. So I decided to destroy the business, one operation at a time. I fed information to the FBI. I warned them about shipments. I helped them build cases against our people. And I watched as you lost millions, as your empire slowly crumbled, and I felt nothing but satisfaction. And Isabella? Dante asked, what did you figure out who she was? 6 months ago, I ran my own background check, deeper than Rocco's. I found the holes in her story. I realized she was Vittorio's daughter. Carmine looked at Isabella. I was going to expose you. Use you as proof that the Romanos were infiltrating us, as a way to start a war that would destroy both families. But then I realized something better. I could use you as my scapegoat. When the FBI finally moved in, when they arrested Marco and Dante, I would reveal that Isabella Romano had been the informant. I'd look like the hero who uncovered the spy, and you'd take the fall for everything I'd done. Except she exposed you first, Tommy said. Yes, I underestimated her. Carmine smiled bitterly. Ironic, isn't it? The spy grew conscience, while I, the loyal consigliere, became the traitor. Marco walked slowly around the table until he stood behind Carmine's chair. You murdered my soldiers with your betrayals. You stole from my family. You violated the oath you took when I made you consigliere. His hand rested on Carmine's shoulder, almost gentle. But worse than all of that, you lied to my face for 7 years. You sat at my table. You broke bread with me. You counseled me on matters of life and death. And every word was poison. I regret nothing, Carmine said, except that I didn't destroy you completely. Marco's hand tightened on his shoulder. Rocco, take him to the wine cellar. Make sure he's comfortable. We have a lot to discuss, Carmine and I. About loyalty. About betrayal. About the price of both. Two guards moved forward and hauled Carmine to his feet. As they dragged him toward the door, he looked at Isabella one last time. You made a mistake, he said. You think confessing makes you different from me? You think loving Dante changes what you are? You're still a Romano. And the Romanos and Castellanos will never have peace. Never. This war will outlive all of us. Then he was gone, and the room fell silent. Marco turned to Isabella. You exposed a traitor who'd been destroying us for 7 years. That deserves acknowledgement. He paused. But Carmine is right about one thing. You're still Vittorio's daughter. And that makes you a weapon pointed at my family's heart. Papa, Dante started. However, Marco interrupted. A weapon can be pointed in different directions. The question is, whose hand holds it? He walked to the window, looking out at his estate, his empire. Isabella Romano, I'm going to give you a choice. You can leave here today. Return to your father. Tell him whatever story you want about your time with us. We'll never speak of this again, and you'll never be welcome in my territory. That's option 1. And option 2? Isabella asked. Option 2 is you stay. You work for me. You use your connection to your father to feed us information about his plans. You become our eyes and ears inside the Romano organization. You want me to betray my own father. I want you to choose a side, Marco corrected, because neutrality is no longer an option. Your father is planning something that threatens all 5 families. Carmine mentioned it before we caught him. He'd been in communication with Vittorio, feeding him information about our vulnerabilities. Whatever Vittorio is planning, it's big enough that he was willing to work with a traitor to make it happen. Marco turned to face her fully. So choose, Isabella, your father's war or Dante's future, the past or the possibility of something different. Choose now. Isabella looked at Dante. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Hope mixed with resignation, love mixed with distrust. She thought about her father, the man who'd raised her, trained her, molded her into a weapon, who'd never asked if she wanted this life, this mission, this war. And she thought about Dante, the man who'd seen something real in her despite the lies, who'd proposed to her in front of his entire world, who was looking at her right now like she could still break his heart. I choose, she began. An explosion rocked the estate. The windows shattered inward, showering them with glass. The sound was deafening. Not one explosion, but multiple coordinated blasts from different directions. Rocco burst into the room, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. We're under attack. Multiple breach points. Armed assault teams coming through the north and east perimeters. How many? Marco demanded, already moving toward the panic room. At least 50. Professional teams. Military-grade weapons. Rocco looked at Isabella, his expression murderous. Boss, it's the Romanos. They're here. And Isabella knew. Her father hadn't waited. Hadn't given her time to complete the mission or return home. He'd decided to strike now, while the Castellanos were vulnerable, while they were dealing with internal betrayal. He was willing to sacrifice her, his own daughter, to win this war. The choice had been made for her. The attack has begun. Isabella's father just declared war while she's inside the Castellano estate. Who do you think she'll fight for? Team Romano or the Team Castellano? Comment below. This is about to get brutal. Gunfire erupted throughout the estate. The sharp crack of rifles, the deeper boom of shotguns, the staccato chatter of automatic weapons. Through the shattered windows, Isabella could see smoke rising from multiple points on the grounds. How do they get past our perimeter? Tommy demanded, drawing his weapon. They didn't, Dante said grimly, looking at a security feed on his phone. They went through it. This isn't a raid. It's a military assault. They have RPGs, body armor, the whole package. This is what your father has been planning. He looked at Isabella, and she saw the question in his eyes. Did you know? I didn't, she said quickly. I swear, Dante, I didn't know the timing. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. Well, it's happening now. Marco's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Rocco, status on our defenses? North guardhouse is down. East perimeter has been breached. They're advancing on the main house in 2 columns. Professional tactics, military precision. Boss, we're outnumbered and outgunned. Then we make them pay for every inch. Marco turned to Tommy. Take 10 men, fortify the main entrance. I want that corridor turned into a killing zone. Dante, you're on the west wing with another 10. Nobody gets to the upper floors. In the panic room, Dante asked, is where I'll be once I see my men positioned. I didn't survive 50 years in this business by being stupid. Marco looked at Isabella. You, come with me. If your father wants you back, he can negotiate for you. You're a hostage now. Papa, wait, Dante started. This isn't a debate. Marco's voice cracked like a whip. Another explosion rocked the house, closer this time. Move, all of you. The household erupted into controlled chaos. Men ran to defensive positions. Weapons were distributed. Security shutters began descending over windows. The beautiful villa transformed into a fortress in minutes. Dante grabbed Isabella's arm as Marco moved toward the panic room. I need to know right now. Is there anything else you haven't told me? Any other surprises your father has planned? Isabella shook her head. I don't know the full assault plan. But Dante, if my father sent 50 men, he's not planning to negotiate. He's planning to wipe you out completely. Then he's going to be disappointed. Dante pulled out a second gun and pressed it into her hands. Do you know how to use this? Yes. Her father had trained her with firearms since she was 12. Then stay close to my father. Protect him if you have to. Because if he dies today, there's no one who can stop this from becoming a full-scale war between all the families. He released her and ran toward his defensive position, shouting orders to his men. Isabella stood for a moment, holding the gun, feeling its weight. This was it, the moment where she had to choose not with words, but with actions. She could run, find her father's men, identify herself, be extracted from the chaos. Or she could stay, fight beside the people she'd been sent to destroy. Another explosion, this one close enough to knock her off her feet. The chandelier in the foyer crashed to the marble floor, crystal shattering into a million pieces. Through the smoke, Isabella saw figures moving, assault teams in tactical gear, weapons raised, advancing through the breach they'd blown in the north wall. And leading them was a face she recognized instantly. Vittorio Romano, her cousin, her father's favorite nephew and enforcer. Victor spotted her through the smoke. For a moment, they locked eyes. Then he raised his rifle and fired. Not at her, at Rocco, who'd been directing men from the foyer. Rocco went down, clutching his leg. Isabella moved without thinking. She raised the gun Dante had given her and returned fire, forcing Victor and his team to take cover behind the ruined wall. Rocco! She ran to the fallen man, dragging him behind a marble pillar. Blood was pouring from his thigh. The bullet had hit his femoral artery. You shot at your own cousin. Rocco gasped, his face pale. He shot at you first. Isabella tore off her jacket, using it as a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. Can you walk? Not fast enough. Leave me. Get to the panic room with the dawn. Not a chance. Isabella looked around desperately. They were pinned down, with Victor's assault team advancing and no clear path to safety. Then she heard a voice that made her blood run cold. Bella, I know you're in there. Victor's voice echoed through the foyer. Your father sent me to bring you home. Stop fighting us and come out. Isabella said nothing, tightening the tourniquet on Rocco's leg. Bella, these people are our enemies. They killed your uncle. They've been our family's enemy for 5 generations. Why are you protecting them? Because they're not the enemy anymore. Isabella shouted back. Victor, this war is wrong. Father is wrong. How many people have to die for a vendetta that started before we were even born? As many as it takes. Victor's response was immediate and cold. Now, come out, or I start executing Castellano soldiers one by one until you do. A gunshot. A scream from somewhere in the house. Victor had made good on his threat. Isabella closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices crushing her. Then Dante was there, appearing from a side corridor with 4 men, laying down covering fire that forced Victor's team back. Get Rocco to the infirmary, Dante ordered. Isabella with me. They ran through the house, Dante's men providing covering fire as they moved. The villa had become a war zone. Bullet holes in priceless paintings, shattered antiques, blood on marble floors. They reached the reinforced door of Marco's panic room. Dante pounded a code into the keypad, and the door swung open. Inside, Marco sat at a bank of monitors showing security feeds from throughout the estate. He looked up as they entered, his face grim. "We're losing the East Wing," he reported. "They got at least 60 men now. Reinforcements arrived 5 minutes ago. This is a full-scale invasion." "How long can we hold?" Dante asked. "Hours, maybe, but eventually they'll overwhelm us through sheer numbers." Marco looked at Isabella. "Your father is committed. He's willing to lose half his men to take this estate." "Why? What does he gain that's worth this cost?" Isabella moved to the monitors, studying the assault patterns. Her father had trained her to think tactically, to see battles as chess games. And suddenly, she saw it. "He's not trying to take the estate," she said slowly. "Look at the pattern. The north and east assaults are heavy, aggressive. But the south and west, minimal pressure. He's pushing you toward the ocean side of the property." "So," Tommy, who'd retreated to the panic room after losing the main entrance, asked, "So there's only one reason to herd you in that direction." Isabella pulled up a map of the estate on one of the monitors. "The private dock. He's got boats waiting. This isn't an assault. It's a kidnapping. He wants to capture you alive." Marco's eyes narrowed. "What?" "Because alive, you're worth more than dead. He can use you to negotiate with the other families, to consolidate power, to—" She stopped, horror dawning. "Oh God, the summit." "What summit?" Dante demanded. "There's a meeting scheduled for next week. All 5 family dons, plus representatives from Chicago and Las Vegas. It's supposed to be a peace negotiation, a way to resolve territorial disputes without bloodshed." Isabella looked at Marco. "But if my father shows up with you as a prisoner, if he's the one who rescued the other dons from the Romano threat, he becomes the most powerful don in the country," Marco finished. "Clever, ruthless, and completely insane." "That's Vittorio," Isabella said bitterly. An explosion rocked the panic room. "Closer, much closer. They're using shaped charges on the reinforced doors," Dante said, checking the security feeds. "We have maybe 10 minutes before they breach the west corridor. Then we need to move," Marco decided. "If they want to push us toward the ocean, we go the opposite direction." "Isabella, you said the south has minimal pressure?" "Yes, it's deliberately light. They want you to think it's your escape route, but it's actually the trap." "I understand." Marco stood, leaning on his cane. "But what if we don't go to the ocean? What if we go through the south, take their light defenses by surprise, and break out into the woods?" "There are 50 acres of forest to the south," Dante said. "If we can reach the tree line, we can disappear, regroup at one of the safe houses." "They'll have men in those woods," Isabella warned. "I'm counting on it." Marco smiled grimly. "Because your cousin Victor made a mistake. He told us exactly what your father wants, to capture us alive. Which means his men have orders not to kill us. We don't have that restriction." He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Enzo, I need extraction. South Woods, 30 minutes. Bring everyone we have. Full combat load." He hung up. "We're going to fight our way out of my own house." "Papa, you're not in any condition," Dante started. "I've been fighting wars since before you were born, boy. I can handle one more." Marco checked his weapon, a classic 1911 pistol that had belonged to his father. "Besides, if I'm going to die today, I'd rather do it on my feet fighting than hiding in a panic room like a coward." He looked at Isabella. "You saved Rocco. You shot at your own cousin to protect my man. That means something. So I'm going to ask you one more time. Whose side are you on?" Isabella looked at the man who'd ordered her uncle's death, whose empire was built on blood and suffering, who represented everything her father had taught her to hate. And then she looked at Dante, standing beside his father, ready to fight impossible odds to protect his family. "I'm on the side that stops this war," Isabella said, "even if it means fighting my own father to do it." Marco nodded slowly. "Good enough. Dante, give her a better weapon. If we're walking into hell, I want everyone armed." Dante handed Isabella a compact submachine gun. You know how to use this? My father made sure I knew how to use everything. She checked the magazine, chamber round. Let's go end this. The panic room door opened, and they stepped back into the war zone that had been a beautiful villa just hours before. The final battle was about to begin, and Isabella Romano, the spy who'd spent 18 months living a lie, was about to discover what she was truly willing to die for. Isabella just chose her side. She's fighting against her own father to protect Dante. Do you think she'll survive this battle? And what happens when she comes face to face with her father? Comment your predictions. The South Corridor was eerily quiet compared to the chaos consuming the rest of the estate. Exactly as Isabella had predicted, deliberately light defenses to funnel them toward the ocean and the waiting boats. Marco led the group, himself, Dante, Tommy, Isabella, and 8 remaining guards. They moved in tight formation, weapons ready, every sense alert. Too quiet, Tommy muttered, scanning the shadows. I don't like it. Neither do I, Marco agreed. But it's our best option. Keep moving. They reached the solarium, a glass-enclosed room filled with exotic plants that opened onto the south lawn. Through the windows, Isabella could see the tree line perhaps 200 yards away. Between here and safety was open ground. A killing field. We'll have to run for it, Dante said. Once we're in the open, they'll know we're not taking the bait. Then we run fast. Marco checked his watch. Enzo should have our extraction team in position in 20 minutes. We just need to survive that long. They were about to exit the solarium when Isabella noticed something that made her freeze. Wait, she pointed at the lawn. Look at the grass. See those slight depressions? In a grid pattern. Dante looked where she was pointing and swore. Landmines? Pressure plates? Probably. Not lethal. My father wants prisoners, remember? But they'll incapacitate anyone who steps on them. Probably trigger alarms, too. How do you know? Tommy demanded. Because it's exactly what I would do if I wanted to control someone's escape route. Isabella studied the pattern. There's a path through them, though. See? The depressions form a corridor. If we follow it exactly. An explosion from the north wing interrupted her. Closer. The Romano forces were advancing faster now, realizing their prey might escape. No time for careful, Marco decided. We risk it. Isabella, you lead. If this is a trap, you spring it first. It was a test. A final one. Isabella didn't hesitate. She stepped onto the lawn, eyes fixed on the ground, moving carefully around the pressure plates she could identify. Behind her, the others followed in single file, trusting her navigation. They were halfway across when shooting started. Not from behind, as they'd expected, but from a tree line ahead. Muzzle flashes lit up the forest as Romano soldiers opened fire. They knew. Tommy shouted, returning fire. They knew we'd come this way. Keep moving, Marco ordered. Don't stop. Isabella ran, weaving between the pressure plates, hearing bullets snap past her head. One of the guards behind her wasn't fast enough. He screamed as a bullet took him in the shoulder, but he kept running. They were 20 yards from the tree line when a figure stepped out of the forest. Don Vittorio Romano, Isabella's father. He was in his 60s, but still imposing, tall, silver-haired, wearing a bulletproof vest over an expensive suit. He held a rifle with the easy competence of a man who'd been in 100 firefights, and he was pointing it directly at Isabella. Bella, he called out, his voice carrying across the distance. Step aside. This doesn't concern you anymore. Isabella stopped running. Behind her, the Castellano group halted, weapons trained on Vittorio and the dozen soldiers flanking him. Papa, Isabella said, her voice steady despite the gun pointed at her heart. Call this off. Please. This war doesn't have to happen. This war started 50 years ago when the Castellanos murdered my brother. Vittorio's eyes were cold. You were sent to destroy them from within. Instead, you betrayed your blood, your family, everything I raised you to be. You raised me to be a weapon. Isabella shouted. You never asked if I wanted this life. You never gave me a choice. Because some truths are more important than choice. Vittorio stepped forward. The Castellanos are a cancer. They poison this city, corrupt everything they touch. I gave you the opportunity to cut out that cancer. Instead, you fell in love with the tumor. Dante moved to stand beside Isabella. Don Romano, your daughter saved my life. She exposed a traitor in my organization. She chose to help us prevent bloodshed. That should mean something. It means she's weak, Vittorio said flatly. Love makes you weak. It clouds judgment. It makes you forget who you are. No, Isabella said. Love made me see clearly for the first time in my life. You talk about the Castellanos being a cancer? Look in the mirror, Papa. You're so consumed by revenge that you're willing to start a war that will kill hundreds of people. You're willing to sacrifice your own daughter to satisfy a vendetta from before I was born. Who's the cancer? Vittorio's face darkened. You dare. I dare because someone has to. Isabella's voice rose. Uncle Antonio died in a war between criminals. He knew the risks. He accepted them. But you've turned his death into a religion, a crusade that justifies any atrocity. When does it end, Papa? When every Castellano is dead. When every rival family is destroyed. When the whole city is burning. When justice is served. This isn't justice. This is madness. For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other across the bloody lawn. Then Vittorio lowered his rifle slightly. Come home, Bella. Leave these people. Come back to your family, and I'll let the Castellanos go. I'll call off the attack. You're more important to me than any revenge. It was the closest thing to love her father had ever offered. Isabella felt tears burn her eyes. I can't, Papa, because if I come back, you'll just use me in some other scheme, some other war. I'll never be your daughter. I'll always be your weapon. Then you've made your choice. Vittorio raised the rifle again, but this time it was pointed at Dante. If I can't have my daughter back, then I'll take his life. An eye for an eye. Everything happened at once. Isabella threw herself in front of Dante just as Vittorio pulled the trigger. The bullet hit her in the chest, the impact spinning her around and driving her to the ground. Dante screamed her name. Gunfire erupted from both sides. The Castellanos firing at the Romano soldiers, the Romanos returning fire, the carefully maintained standoff dissolving into chaos. But Isabella barely heard it. She was on her back, staring up at the early morning sky, feeling warm blood spreading across her chest. The pain was distant, abstract, her body going numb. Dante was suddenly there, kneeling beside her, his hands pressing against the wound. No, no, no. Isabella, stay with me. Don't you dare die. Is it bad? She asked, her voice surprisingly calm. You're wearing a vest. He was crying, she realized. The dangerous underboss of the Castellano family was crying. The bullet hit the vest. You're bruised, probably cracked ribs, but you're not dying. You're not dying. He was right. As the initial shock faded, Isabella realized she could breathe, could move. The vest had stopped the bullet. Her father had shot her, but he'd also taught her to always wear protection in a combat situation. The irony would have made her laugh if her ribs didn't hurt so much. Around them, the firefight continued for another 30 seconds. Then a new sound joined the chaos. Helicopters, multiple, coming in fast and low. But not Romano helicopters. Police helicopters. And behind them, a massive convoy of FBI vehicles screaming up the estate's main drive. Someone had called in the authorities. The Romano soldiers began retreating immediately, disappearing into the woods. Vittorio stood for a moment longer, looking at his daughter lying on the ground. You chose him over me, he said quietly. I'll never forgive you for that. Then he was gone, vanishing into the forest with his men, leaving behind only bodies and chaos. The FBI swarmed the estate. Agents in tactical gear, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Within minutes, the ground were locked down. Marco approached one of the agents, a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and a no-nonsense expression. Special Agent Crawford, Marco said smoothly. What brings the FBI to my home at this ungodly hour? We received an anonymous tip about a terrorist attack on your estate, Don Castellano. Multiple casualties, property damage, and she looked around at the destruction. It appears the tip was accurate. Anonymous tip? Marco's eyes narrowed. From someone inside your organization. About 30 minutes ago, we received detailed information about the assault, including the number of attackers, their positions, and a request for immediate federal intervention to prevent a massacre. Dante helped Isabella to her feet. Who made the call? The caller identified himself as your consigliere, a man named Carmine Vitali. Isabella and Dante exchanged glances. Carmine, the traitor they caught just hours before, had called the FBI. One final act of betrayal against Marco, or possibly something else. Where's Carmine now? Marco asked, his voice dangerous. We found him in your wine cellar. He's been badly beaten. He's requesting witness protection in exchange for testimony against your organization. Marco's face went very still. I see. Well, Agent Crawford, as you can see, we're the victims here. The Romano crime family launched an unprovoked attack on my home. I have security footage proving everything. I'm prepared to cooperate fully with your investigation. It was a masterful pivot. Marco was going to use the FBI raid to his advantage, painting himself as the victim and Vittorio as the aggressor. Agent Crawford looked skeptical. We'll need statements from everyone present. No one leaves until we've documented this scene completely. And Don Castellano will be having a very long conversation about your business operations. I wouldn't expect anything less. Marco smiled pleasantly. My lawyers will be here within the hour. As the FBI began processing the scene, Dante pulled Isabella aside into the ruins of the solarium. You took a bullet for me, he said quietly, even knowing it might kill you. I knew I was wearing a vest. You hoped you were wearing a vest. There's a difference. He touched her face gently. Why? Because somewhere in the last 18 months, between all the lies and the missions and the betrayals, I actually fell in love with you. For real. Not as part of a cover story. Not as a manipulation. Just love. Dante pulled her close, careful of her bruised ribs, and kissed her. It was soft, tender, full of promise and pain and hope all tangled together. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Your father will never stop hunting you. You know that, right? You betrayed him in front of his men, chose his enemies over him. In his eyes, you're dead already. I know. And my father, even though you saved our lives, helped us catch a traitor, took a bullet for me, he'll never fully trust you. You're still a Romano. That blood runs too deep. I know that too. So, where does that leave us? Isabella looked at the destruction around them. The beautiful estate turned into a war zone, the bodies being tagged by FBI forensics, the empire of blood and secrets that had consumed both their families for generations. Maybe it leaves us somewhere new, she said. Not Castellano, not Romano. Just Dante and Isabella. Two people trying to build something that isn't based on revenge or violence or ancient grudges. That's naive, Dante said, but he was smiling slightly. My world doesn't work that way. Then maybe it's time for a new world. Behind them, Marco was giving his statement to Agent Crawford, spinning a version of events that was technically true but strategically incomplete. Tommy was coordinating with what remained of their security team. The FBI was cataloging evidence that would take months to process. The Romano-Castellano war had exploded into public view. Whatever happened next would reshape the entire underworld. I love you, Dante said, even though you're impossible. Even though loving you is probably the most dangerous thing I've ever done. I love you too, Isabella replied. Even though you're a criminal. Even though your father will probably kill me eventually. We really know how to pick him, don't we? Isabella laughed, then winced as pain shot through her ribs. We really do. They stood together in the ruins of the old world, watching the sun rise over the ocean, knowing that whatever came next would be complicated and dangerous, and probably catastrophic. But at least they'd face it together. Isabella just chose love over blood. Her father disowned her. She's wounded. The FBI is everywhere. Do you think Dante and Isabella can actually survive what comes next? Final act incoming. This is going to be epic. 6 months later, the safe house was a modest apartment in Portland, Oregon, about as far from New York as Isabella could get while staying in the continental United States. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with appliances from the 1990s, and a view of a parking lot. It was the most beautiful place she'd ever lived. Isabella stood at the kitchen counter, making coffee, wearing an oversized sweater and her hair in a messy bun. No designer clothes. No carefully constructed personas. Just herself. For the first time in her entire life, she was just herself. The aftermath of that bloody morning at the Castellano estate had been predictably complicated. The FBI had spent 3 months investigating, interviewing witnesses, analyzing evidence. In the end, Don Marco had walked away with surprisingly minimal legal consequences. A few minor charges, hefty fines, but no prison time. His lawyers were that good. Vittorio Romano, however, had vanished. The FBI had issued warrants, but he disappeared into the network of safe houses and international connections that men like him spent decades building. Isabella knew he was out there somewhere, planning his next move, nursing his hatred, and thinking about his daughter who'd betrayed him. Carmine Vitali had entered witness protection, his testimony helping the FBI dismantle several criminal operations. The irony wasn't lost on Isabella. The traitor who'd caused so much damage had ultimately helped bring some justice, even if his motives were revenge rather than righteousness. As for her and Dante, the front door opened. Dante stepped in, carrying grocery bags, his hair slightly damp from the Portland drizzle. He looked different here, away from New York, less dangerous, more human. He wore jeans and a simple jacket instead of expensive suits. "They had those cookies you like," he said, unpacking the groceries. "The chocolate ones with the—" He stopped, seeing her expression. "What's wrong?" Isabella picked up the letter that had arrived in that morning's mail. No return address, postmarked from Mexico City. "My father found me." Dante went very still. "Ow, does it matter?" She handed him the letter. "Read it." Dante opened the envelope carefully, checking for powder or devices, old habits dying hard. Inside was a single page, handwritten in elegant script. "Bella, 6 months. 6 months you've been hiding, playing house with the enemy, pretending you can escape what you are. You can't. Blood is blood. Betrayal is betrayal. And debts must be paid. I'm giving you one final chance. Come home. Return to your family. Leave Dante Castellano and whatever fantasy you've built with him, and I will forgive everything. The slate wiped clean. But if you refuse, if you continue down this path, then you are no longer my daughter. You are simply another enemy who must be eliminated. You have 1 week to decide. Your father." Dante set the letter down, his jaw tight. "He's bluffing. He wouldn't actually kill you. Wouldn't he?" Isabella's laugh was bitter. "He shot me 6 months ago. The only reason I survived was body armor. He's capable of anything when his pride is wounded. So we run. Again. Different city, different names. For how long, Dante? The rest of our lives? Always looking over our shoulders, always waiting for the day he finds us." Isabella shook her head. "That's not living. That's just existing." Dante pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her protectively. "Then we go back to New York. I put every resource my family has into protecting you. My father owes you. You saved his life, caught his traitor. He'll help. And what then? I live in a fortress, surrounded by guards for the rest of my life. That's also not living. What do you want to do?" Isabella pulled back, looking up at him. "I want to end this. Not with more violence. Not with more revenge. I want to break the cycle. How? By confronting my father, face to face, and offering him something he wants more than revenge." "There's nothing Vittorio Romano wants more than revenge," Dante said flatly. "You're wrong. There's one thing." Isabella picked up her phone, scrolling to a file she'd been compiling for months. "Power. My father's entire attack on your family was about becoming the most powerful Don on the East Coast. He wanted to capture Marco, use him as leverage at the 5-family summit, consolidate control. And the summit is in 2 weeks. Atlantic City. Every major family will be there, including my father. He won't be able to resist. It's too important." Dante's eyes narrowed. "You want to walk into a room full of crime bosses and what? Give a speech about peace and love?" "No. I want to offer my father a deal. I have 18 months of intelligence on the Castellano organization. Financial records, operational details, political connections. Everything I gathered while working undercover. Isabella. I never destroyed those files, Dante. I couldn't. They were my insurance policy, my only leverage if things went wrong. She took his hands. What if I offered them to my father? Not to use against you, but to use against the other families? Information he could trade to become a power broker without firing a shot. No war, no bloodshed, just intelligence and strategy. You want to betray my family after all. Dante's voice was cold. No, I want to save both our families from destroying each other. Isabella squeezed his hands. Those files I collected, you know what's in them. Financial crimes, money laundering, tax evasion. Things that could hurt your family legally but wouldn't destroy the organization. Your father could survive the exposure. He survived worse. And in exchange, my father leaves us alone. He gets what he really wants: power, respect, control, and we get to live our lives without constantly looking over our shoulders. Dante was quiet for a long moment, processing. My father would never agree to this. You're talking about deliberately exposing Castellano operations. Your father is pragmatic. If I frame it right, if I show him that this is the only way to end the Romano threat without starting a war that could destroy all the families, he might listen. Might. That's a big gamble. Everything about us has been a gamble from the start. Isabella touched his face. I'm tired of running, Dante. I'm tired of hiding. I want us to have a real future, not just moments stolen between crises. This is the only way I can think of to make that happen. Dante closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. When he opened them again, there was resignation there, mixed with determination. If we're going to do this, we do it right. We go back to New York. We talk to my father. We prepare for every possible outcome, including the one where both our fathers decide we're liabilities and try to kill us. Romantic. I'm a realist. He kissed her forehead. But I'm also in love with you. So if you want to walk into a room full of murderers and try to broker peace through betrayal and blackmail, I'll be right beside you. Even if it means choosing me over your family. I chose you 6 months ago when I didn't turn you over to my father for execution. Everything since then has just been confirming that choice. Isabella wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. We're probably going to die, you know. Probably. But at least we'll die trying to do something right instead of perpetuating a cycle of violence that's lasted 5 generations. When did you become an optimist? When I fell in love with a woman who thinks she can change the world through PowerPoint presentations and strategic betrayal. He pulled back, smiling slightly. Besides, my father always said the best way to survive in this business is to be unpredictable. I don't think anyone will predict what we're about to do. 2 weeks later, Atlantic City. The 5-family summit took place in a neutral location, a casino conference room that had been swept for bugs, secured by guards from each family, and set up with a massive round table to ensure no one held a position of dominance. Don Marco Castellano sat with Dante at his right hand. Across the table, Don Vittorio Romano sat with his nephew Victor. The other 3 family dons, Marchetti, Russo, and De Luca, occupied the remaining positions. The atmosphere was glacial. Isabella stood at the front of the room, next to a projector screen, wearing a professional suit and carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd spent 18 months infiltrating enemy territory. She was the only woman in the room, the only person under 40, and she was about to propose something that would either end a 50-year blood feud or get her killed. Gentlemen, she began, her voice steady. Thank you for agreeing to hear me out. I know this is unusual. I know I have no official standing in any of your organizations. But I have information that affects all of you and a proposal that could benefit everyone at this table. Get on with it, Vittorio growled. He hadn't looked directly at her since she entered the room. Isabella clicked the remote. The screen lit up with financial records, organizational charts, operational details. For 18 months, I worked inside the Castellano organization as Sophia Bennett. During that time, I collected extensive intelligence on their operations, finances, and political connections. This intelligence was supposed to be used by my father to destroy the Castellanos completely. She paused, letting that sink in. But 6 months ago, I realized that this war, The Romano-Castellano blood feud that has consumed both families for 5 generations is destroying more than just our families. It's destabilizing all the families, creating openings for federal investigations, weakening all of you. She clicked to the next slide, a timeline showing how the Romano-Castellano conflict had impacted the other families. Every time my father and Don Castellano clash, it creates chaos. Chaos that the FBI exploits. Chaos that weakens your territories, your operations, your power. Sophia Russo, the only other woman who'd ever commanded respect in this world, leaned forward. So what are you proposing? I'm proposing an end to the war. Not through violence, but through mutual benefit. Isabella looked directly at her father. Papa, you want power. You want to be the most influential Don on the East Coast. I can give you that. This intelligence I collected, it's not just about the Castellanos. It includes information on all the families, connections I mapped, vulnerabilities I identified. She clicked to another slide. I'm offering you this information, not to start a war, but to become the most informed power broker in the room. Knowledge is power. With this intelligence, you can mediate disputes, prevent conflicts before they start, position yourself as the wise counselor all the families turn to. In exchange for what? Vittorio's voice was cold. In exchange for peace. You leave the Castellanos alone. You leave Dante and me alone. You acknowledge that the blood debt from Uncle Antonio's death has been paid through my 18 months of service and the intelligence I'm providing. The war ends today. The room erupted in chaos. The other Dons started talking over each other, some agreeing it was time to end the endless Romano-Castellano conflict, others arguing that blood debts couldn't be negotiated away. Marco stood, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. And what does the Castellano family get in this arrangement? My daughter-in-law, he emphasized the word, making it clear he recognized the relationship, has just offered to give my enemy detailed intelligence about my operations. Why would I agree to this? Because Don Castellano, you get something more valuable than secrets. Isabella looked at him directly. You get a real alliance. My father, with all his resources, his political connections, his strategic mind, working with you instead of against you. Imagine what the Romano and Castellano families could accomplish together. You'd be unstoppable. It was the key insight she'd built her entire plan around. Both her father and Marco crave power. If she could show them that alliance was more profitable than war, their pragmatism would overcome their pride. Vittorio stood slowly, and every person in the room tensed. You stand here, he said to Isabella, in front of everyone, offering to betray the man you claim to love. You're giving me intelligence that could destroy him, his family, everything he's built. And you call this love? No, Isabella said quietly. I call it trust. I'm trusting that you're the man who taught me that power comes from strategy, not violence. I'm trusting that you're smart enough to see that this alliance is worth more than revenge. And I'm trusting that somewhere, underneath all the anger and pride, you still love me enough to let me be happy. Father and daughter stared at each other across the table. Dante Castellano, Vittorio said, not breaking eye contact with Isabella. Stand up. Dante rose, his hand instinctively moving toward his concealed weapon. Do you love my daughter? Yes. Would you die for her? Without hesitation. Would you kill for her? I already have. Vittorio finally looked away from Isabella, studying Dante with the cold assessment of a man evaluating a weapon. Marco, your son is either the bravest man I've ever met or the stupidest. I haven't decided which. He's brave, Marco said. Stupid would be lying to you in a room full of witnesses. Vittorio was silent for a long moment. Then, Isabella, come here. Isabella walked around the table, her heart pounding. She stopped in front of her father, looking up at the man who'd shaped her entire life. Vittorio reached into his jacket. Every guard in the room tensed. He pulled out a photograph. Old, creased, showing a young woman with kind eyes. Your mother, Vittorio said quietly. She died when you were 6. Too young for you to remember much about her. But I remember. She was like you, strong, stubborn, convinced she could change the world through sheer force of will. He touched Isabella's face, a gesture of affection she hadn't felt from him in years. She would have hated what I turned you into. A weapon. A tool. Everything she never wanted for you. His voice cracked slightly. I thought I was protecting you by making you strong. But really, I was just passing on my own trauma, my own need for revenge. Papa, I accept your proposal. He stepped back, his voice becoming formal. The blood debt is paid. The war between Romano and Castellano ends today. In exchange, I receive the intelligence you've gathered and the right to act as mediator between the families when conflict arise. He looked at Dante. And if you ever hurt my daughter, I don't care what peace treaty we've signed. I will kill you slowly. Understood, Dante said. Vittorio turned to Marco. I'm too old to keep fighting wars that started before my daughter was born. It's time for something new. Are you willing to try? Marco stood, walked around the table, and extended his hand. For our children, he said. And for the future, that doesn't have to be written in blood. The two dons shook hands. The room exploded in conversation, some approving, some skeptical, all recognizing they'd just witnessed something unprecedented. Isabella felt Dante's hand find hers, squeezing gently. They'd done it. Against all odds, against generations of hatred, they'd found a way to peace. It wouldn't be perfect. There would be challenges, setbacks, moments when the old grudges threatened to resurface. But for the first time in 5 generations, there was a chance for something better. Epilogue. 1 year later. The wedding took place on neutral ground, a vineyard in Napa Valley, far from New York and the ghosts of the past. Isabella walked down the aisle wearing a simple white dress, carrying flowers her mother had loved. Her father waited to give her away, looking older but somehow lighter, as if putting down the burden of revenge had taken years off his life. You're sure about this? Vittorio asked quietly as they walked. Completely. He's still a Castellano, and I'm still a Romano. But maybe we can be something else too. Something new. At the altar, Dante waited with Marco beside him as best man. The old Don looked almost pleased. The alliance between the families had proven profitable, and Dante had proven himself worthy of leading the next generation. The ceremony was small, intimate, just family and close friends. No weapons, no guards, no underlying tension. Just two people who'd survived impossible odds, choosing love over blood, hope over history. When they kissed, sealing vows that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago, Isabella felt something she'd never experienced before. Freedom. She was no longer just a Romano or a spy or a weapon. She was Isabella Castellano, and the future was hers to write. The end. Final viewer engagement. 30 seconds. What an incredible journey. Isabella went from spy to savior, from enemy to wife, from weapon to woman. She chose love over blood and changed the entire underworld in the process. Now I want to hear from you. 1. Did you think Isabella would survive when her father shot her? 2. Will you team Isabella or team Dante from the beginning? 3. Do you think the peace between Romano and Castellano will last? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you love this story, smash that like button, subscribe for more epic romance tales, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our next story. Share this with anyone who loves mafia romance, spy thrillers, or impossible love stories. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.